You finished the email 20 minutes ago. It's 4 sentences long, but you're still reading it. You've changed the second line 3 times. You deleted a comma, added it back, deleted it again. You're now questioning whether best regards sounds too formal or if thanks sounds too casual. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice is whispering, if you send this and it sounds weird, they'll think less of you. So you read it a 4th time, a 5th. And by the time you finally hit send, you feel a strange mix of relief and exhaustion, like you just diffused a bomb that was never actually ticking. If any part of that felt familiar, stay with me. Because today we're going to talk about something that disguises itself as ambition, discipline, and high standards, but often operates more like a cage you built for yourself and then swallowed the key. We're going to talk about perfectionism. And more importantly, we're going to talk about a concept your brain probably resists on a deep, almost allergic level, the idea that good enough might actually be better than perfect. Now, here's the thing most people get wrong about perfectionism. They think it's about wanting to do great work. They think it's about caring deeply about quality. And if that's all it were, we wouldn't need to have this conversation. Wanting to do well is healthy. Perfectionism isn't about wanting to do well. Perfectionism is the belief that anything less than flawless is unacceptable. And more painfully, that your worth as a person is somehow tangled up in whether you achieve that impossible standard. That's the part nobody puts on the motivational poster. Psychologist Thomas Curran, who has spent years studying perfectionism across cultures and generations, distinguishes between 3 types. There's self-oriented perfectionism, where you impose crushing standards on yourself. There's other-oriented perfectionism, where you hold everyone around you to impossibly high bars, which tends to make you really fun at dinner parties. And then there's socially prescribed perfectionism, where you believe the world demands perfection from you, that love, respect, belonging, all of it is conditional on your flawless performance. That last one, by the way, has been rising dramatically in young people over the past 3 decades. Curran and his colleague Andrew Hill published a meta-analysis in 2019 showing that socially prescribed perfectionism increased by roughly 33% between 1989 and 2016 among college students. That's not a personal failing. That's a cultural shift. Social media, academic pressure, economic precarity, they've all conspired to create an environment where young people increasingly feel like they must be perfect just to be acceptable. But let's zoom in from the cultural level to the neurological one, because something fascinating happens inside a perfectionist's brain. When you set a goal and reach it, your brain is supposed to release dopamine, that little neurochemical reward that says, nice work, you did the thing. But for perfectionists, that reward system is essentially hijacked. Research using fMRI scanning has shown that people with high perfectionist traits tend to have an overactive error detection system in their anterior cingulate cortex. That's the part of your brain that notices mistakes, discrepancies, things that are slightly off. In perfectionists, it's like a smoke alarm that goes off every time you make toast. The signal is real, but the threat is not. So instead of feeling satisfaction when you finish something well, your brain skips right past the reward and lands on, but what about this tiny flaw? You never get to enjoy the meal because you're too busy inspecting the plate. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine 2 potters working side by side. One of them makes 50 bowls in a month. Some are lopsided, some are beautiful. She learns from every single one. The other potter spends the entire month on 1 bowl. She starts over 9 times. She researches glazing techniques for hours. She compares her work to ceramics she saw in a museum once. At the end of the month, she has 1 bowl, and she's not even sure she likes it. Here's the paradox. The potter who made 50 imperfect bowls almost always ends up more skilled, more creative, and more fulfilled than the one who chased perfection on a single piece. This isn't just a metaphor, by the way. There's a version of this exact experiment described in the book Art and Fear by David Bales and Ted Orland, involving a ceramics class where one group was graded on quantity and the other on quality. The quantity group produced the best work because they practiced, they iterated, they let themselves be bad on the way to being good. And that's the crux of it. Perfectionism doesn't lead to perfect outcomes. It leads to avoidance, procrastination, paralysis, and a particular kind of suffering that looks like laziness from the outside but feels like drowning from the inside. You don't skip the assignment because you don't care. You skip it because you care so much that the gap between what you want to create and what you believe you'll actually produce feels unbearable. Psychologists call this perfectionistic procrastination, and it's one of the most misunderstood patterns in human behavior. The person lying on the couch staring at the ceiling isn't unmotivated. They're terrified. Terrified of producing something that confirms their deepest fear, that they are not enough. So what do you do with this? How do you loosen the grip of something that feels woven into your identity? This is where the concept of good enough comes in, and I want you to sit with it for a second before your brain rejects it. Good enough is not mediocrity. It's not settling. It is a radical, psychologically sophisticated act of self-trust. The term actually has roots in the work of Donald Winnicott, a British pediatrician and psychoanalyst who coined the phrase the good enough mother in the 1950s. His argument was revolutionary at the time. He said that a child doesn't need a perfect parent. A child needs a parent who is present, responsive and imperfect, because it's through those imperfections that the child learns to tolerate frustration, develop resilience, and engage with reality rather than fantasy. The good enough parent isn't failing. She's teaching her child that the world is survivable even when it's messy. Now extend that idea to yourself. What if your good enough essay, your good enough presentation, your good enough dinner recipe, what if those aren't failures? What if they're the things that actually allow you to stay in the game? Because here's the mathematical truth that perfectionists rarely confront. The difference between 90% effort and 100% effort is usually negligible in outcome, but enormous in cost. That last 10% devours time, energy, mental health, relationships, sleep. You polish and polish and polish, and the person receiving your work literally cannot tell the difference, but you can feel the difference. You feel it in your jaw, in your shoulders, in the 3 a.m. spiral where you're rethinking a sentence you wrote 6 hours ago. There's also something deeper happening that I think is worth naming. Perfectionism often serves as an emotional armor. If I am perfect, I cannot be criticized. If I am perfect, I cannot be rejected. If I am perfect, I am safe. And the tragedy of that logic is that it doesn't work. You can do everything right and still be misunderstood, overlooked, or hurt. Perfection was never going to protect you. It was just going to exhaust you while you waited for a safety that doesn't exist. Brené Brown talks about this beautifully. She makes the distinction between healthy striving and perfectionism by saying that healthy striving is internally driven. How can I grow? While perfectionism is externally driven. What will people think? That one question, what will people think, is the engine running underneath so much perfectionistic behavior. And the moment you recognize it, the moment you catch yourself rewriting the email, not because it's unclear, but because you're afraid of being judged, something shifts. You don't have to stop caring. You just have to notice who you're performing for, and whether that audience is even real. So if you're watching this and you recognize yourself, if you're the person who takes 3 hours to write a text, who rewrites the first paragraph of everything 14 times, who abandons projects not because they're bad, but because they're not extraordinary, I want you to hear something. Your standards are not the problem. Your relationship with your standards is. You can still want excellence. You can still care about craft, but you can also finish things. You can also rest. You can also let something be done instead of letting it be perfect, and discover that the world doesn't collapse, that people still respect you, that you are still worthy of love and belonging even when your work has rough edges. Good enough isn't the enemy of greatness. It's the bridge to it. Because the person who finishes, who ships, who shows up imperfectly and consistently, that person grows. That person learns. That person is actually in the arena, getting better, while the perfectionist is still in the locker room adjusting their shoelaces for the 14th time. Let that sink in for a moment, and if it resonates, maybe drop a comment and tell me, what's one thing you've been holding back on because it doesn't feel perfect yet? I'd genuinely love to know. And if this is the kind of conversation that makes your brain light up, consider subscribing. We go deep here, not perfect, but deep. And honestly, that's more than good enough.